Tonight, a baby somewhere will wake up screaming at 3 a.m., and one exhausted parent will stumble across a cold floor alone in the dark to deal with it. You think this is normal. You think this is just what raising a child is. But for almost the entire human story, no parent ever did this alone. Not once. The way you were raised would have looked insane to your ancestors. A single mother in a quiet apartment, a father coming home after dark, a baby sleeping in a separate room, behind a closed door, in total silence. To a human from 40,000 years ago, this wouldn't look like parenting. It would look like abandonment. So how did they actually do it? How did ancient humans raise children in a world with no cribs, no schools, no doctors, and no instruction manual? The answer is far stranger and far warmer than you'd expect. Let's go back. Picture a small band of humans moving across an open landscape. Maybe 30 people, maybe 40. Everyone knows everyone. And when a child is born into this group, something remarkable happens. The baby is not handed to one woman to manage alone. The baby is passed around. This is the part that breaks the modern brain. Among many foraging people studied in the 20th century, a newborn is held, on average, by many different people in its first days of life. Not just the mother, aunts, older sisters, grandmothers, cousins, sometimes women who aren't related at all. The anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hardy gave this a name. She calls it cooperative breeding, and she argues it isn't a cultural quirk. She argues it is the reason our species survived at all. Think about it. A human baby is helpless for years. It cannot walk, cannot feed itself, cannot run from danger. A mother gorilla can raise her young mostly alone because gorilla babies cling and grow fast. But a human child is so demanding, so slow to develop, that no single mother could ever carry that weight by herself. So she didn't. The group carried it with her. Hardy calls the people who help raise a child its alloparents. Allo means other parents. And in ancient human life, you had many. This changes everything about what a childhood was. You were never the responsibility of two people. You were the responsibility of a village in the most literal sense. If your mother was sick, you were fed by someone else. If your mother was foraging, you were watched by an older cousin. If you cried, a dozen hands reached for you, not one. Does that sound exhausting to coordinate? It wasn't. It was the opposite. It was how exhaustion got divided so thin that no one broke. Now here is where it gets even stranger. The anthropologist Melvin Connor spent years studying the children of the Jew/Honzi people of the Kalahari, and he documented something that most modern parents would find almost unbelievable. Babies were in physical contact with another person almost constantly. They were carried, skin against skin, for most of the day. When they cried, the response came in seconds, not minutes. There was no theory of letting a baby cry it out. There was no closed door. And yet these children did not grow up clingy or fragile. They grew up confident, independent, calm. Connor found that children who were held the most became, in the end, the most self-reliant adults. Read that again. The most held became the most independent. That single fact quietly demolishes one of the oldest pieces of parenting advice you've ever heard. The idea that if you comfort a child too much, you'll spoil them. That holding a baby every time it cries will make it weak. Ancient human childhood says the exact reverse. Security didn't make children dependent. Security is what gave them the courage to let go. So what was a child's actual day like? Astonishingly free. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, studied by the anthropologist Frank Marlowe, children spent enormous amounts of time simply playing, unsupervised, in mixed age groups. A 5-year-old might spend the whole day with a 9-year-old and a 3-year-old, roaming, climbing, imitating the adults, learning by copying. No one scheduled their day. No one taught them in rows. They learned to dig roots by watching someone dig roots. They learned to track animals by trailing after older kids who were already trying. This is how a human child was built to learn, not by instruction, by immersion. And notice what this means. The older children were not a burden on the adults. They were part of the childcare system. A 9-year-old watching the younger ones wasn't doing a chore. She was doing exactly what evolution shaped her to do. Children helped raise children. The whole structure leaned on itself, generation supporting generation, all the way down. But there's one member of this ancient family we haven't talked about yet. And she might be the most important of all, the grandmother. In most animals, females reproduce until they die. Humans are one of the strange exceptions. A woman lives for decades after she can no longer have children. For a long time, this puzzled scientists. Why would evolution keep a female alive long past her ability to reproduce? What is she for? The anthropologist Kristen Hawkes proposed an answer that is now famous. She called it the grandmother hypothesis. The idea is simple and beautiful. A grandmother who can no longer have her own babies pours all of her energy into her grandchildren. She gathers food for them. She watches them. She lets their mother have another child sooner because the older one is already covered. In Hawkes' data among the Hadza, the hardest working foragers were often not the young mothers. They were the grandmothers. So the long human lifespan, the very fact that you might know your grandmother at all, may exist because grandmothers made children survive. You are, in a real sense, descended from great helpers. The ones who didn't quit when their own childbearing ended. The ones who kept giving. Doesn't that reframe the whole picture? We imagine survival as the strongest hunter, the fastest runner. But the engine of human survival may have been an old woman, patiently digging tubers for a child who wasn't even her own to feed. Now, let's talk about fathers, because their story surprised researchers too. The anthropologist Barry Hewlett lived among the Aka people of Central Africa, and he found fathers who were involved with their infants to a degree almost unheard of in the modern industrial world. Aka fathers held their babies, soothed them, stayed close. Hewlett recorded that an Aka father was within arm's reach of his infant for a huge portion of the day. These were not distant providers. They were hands-on, tender, present. So the image of the ancient father as a silent, absent figure who only brought home meat? That's a story we made up. The deep human pattern was closeness, warmth. A father who knew the weight of his own child in his arms, but it would be a lie to tell you this world was gentle in every way. It wasn't. Children died. Often. In a world without medicine, a fever could end a life in days. Many of those passed around babies did not live to grow up, and ancient parents grieved them with a depth we can barely imagine. The constant holding, the never being alone, was not only love. It was also a kind of vigilance against a world that could take a child at any moment. So the closeness had two faces. It was tenderness, and it was protection. The reason there were always hands reaching for the baby is that the baby was always, quietly, in danger. Love and fear were braided together, the way they still are in you, every time you check that your child is still breathing in the night. Now bring it all forward. Bring it into your world. Because here is the uncomfortable mirror. The way most people raise children today is, on the long scale of human history, brand new. The isolated parent. The single home. The child in its own silent room. The mother who is expected to be everything at once, with no aunts down the hall, no cousins underfoot, no grandmother in the kitchen. We took a task that evolution designed for an entire group, and we handed it to one or two people. And then we wonder why they feel like they're drowning. You are not failing because you find it hard. You find it hard because you are trying to do, alone, what was never meant to be done alone. The exhaustion you feel is not weakness. It is the echo of a missing village. Your nervous system is still waiting for the other hands that were supposed to be there. The ones that, for 40,000 years, always were. There's a famous experiment by the psychologist Edward Tronick called the still face. A mother plays warmly with her baby, then suddenly goes blank and unresponsive. Within seconds, the baby grows distressed, reaching, crying, trying desperately to bring her back. It shows us something ancient wired deep into every infant. A baby does not just want food. A baby needs to be met, responded to, held in another person's attention. That need never leaves you. You carry it your whole life. The reason you feel soothed by a hand on your shoulder, the reason loneliness physically aches, the reason you still, somewhere, want to be held when you're afraid. It all traces back to a kind of childhood your body remembers, but your life no longer provides. So how did ancient humans raise their children? Not in silence, not behind closed doors, not alone. They raised them in a warm tangle of arms, in constant touch, surrounded by a crowd that never let them fall. They built children the way you build anything that has to last. Slowly, together, with many hands. Tonight, a baby somewhere will wake up screaming at 3 a.m., and one exhausted parent will stumble across a cold floor to answer it. But now you know the truth your body has known all along. That parent was never supposed to walk alone.